That would be great. We are ready.
Are you welcoming us, or am I supposed to begin?
You're all welcome to start reading.
I thought you were going to do some kind of introduction.
If you guys have a short bio, feel free to read that too.
Oh no, I'll just say, welcome to the Thrush poetry reading.
I never do that.
That's what I was expecting. So, I'm Katie Manning. My tenure and promotion were just announced today at my university, so I get to say that I'm a professor of writing.
Congratulations.
Oh, great.
That's wonderful.
I'm excited. I'm also the founding editor-in-chief of Whale Road Review. I like to say that that's the work I do for love and no money at all.
Right, like Thrush.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's fulfilling work. I've been published in some places, and I won't belabor that at all. You can find if you want to know more about me. So I figured I would just read a few pairs of poems, and then I will recite one to end. So I'm going to start by reading two poems from Tasty Other, which is my full-length collection of poems that was published in 2016. It won the Main Street Rag Poetry Book Award. And the opening poem from this collection was published in Thrush in March of 2012.
That's good.
And the other thing I like to say about this poem, by way of introduction, is that one, it follows, or it responds to those weekly pregnancy calendars that are like, this week your baby is the size of a kumquat. This week your baby is the size of a, baseball. Yeah. And the other is that the syllable count line by line follows the Fibonacci sequence. So if you like math, that's kind of a fun fact. And if you don't, just pretend I didn't say that.
Math makes me cry in general.
Oh. But you published this poem. So
I did. I love the poem. I remember it.
So this is week by week. At this time, your offspring is invisible. Now a speck, the dream of seed and root. Baby is a dime, quarter, increasing in value, golf ball, gerbil, your own palm. Then more sports equipment, softball, football, racquetball court. By this point, your baby is a train, a field, a city, an ocean. This week, baby is the sky, now a hemisphere, now a blurry world. And then the other poem I'm going to read from this one, from this book, Tasty Other, is called Sleeping Beauty's Mother, and it's just one of my favorites. So, Sleeping Beauty's Mother. A king and a queen wanted to have children. They tried everything: travel to drink the waters of the world, vows of silence, solitude, and celibacy, pilgrimages to trendy shrines, prayers to various gods and goddesses, and nothing worked. Finally, they tried sex. The queen became pregnant. The king chased after fairies. 7 fairy godmothers came to give the baby gifts, though the king didn't bring the oldest fairy in the land, so she brought herself and a curse to the shower. The girl will prick her finger with a spindle and die. No, said the last young fairy, the girl will only sleep for 100 years, and she'll wake to a prince's kiss. Everyone loved the lovely young fairy, and everyone felt sorry for the little baby doll. The king passed anti-spindle laws, and the queen, tired of swollen breasts, sleepless nights, a king who was too friendly with fairies, thought of a century of sleep and a new young prince, and wished she had her daughters good luck.
Beautiful.
So the next couple of poems I'm going to read for you come from a forthcoming chapbook, and it's going to be published by Riverglass Press sometime this fall, hopefully August if all goes well. We'll see. Life is in flux right now, so
that's for sure.
I mean, it always is, and I think that we're just more aware that we don't really know, so that's okay. We're going to go with it. But sometime in the future, this will be a chapbook. And this chapbook is really special to me. It's called 28,065 Nights. And it's a chapbook of poems that I wrote sort of to and also about my granny after she passed away. And I wanted to capture her stories that she had told me and also our stories that we had created together. And so I'll just read you two of the poems from this book. One of them is the title poem, 28,065 Nights. I tell your stories to keep myself alive. I tell you new stories. I speak them aloud to you when no one is around, the way you used to talk to Grandpa in your bedroom after his death. The stories play on repeat in my head. I write them down. I tell them to Elliot when he asks. A year later, he still remembers you, but I don't know how long his memories from two will last. To him, you will always be more story than person. Are we always more story than person? Words thicker than water? I got the wave of your hair and your lack of wisdom teeth. I did not get your metabolism that let you eat 6 hot dogs at one cookout, but I get to keep that story, more necessary now than blood or breath. And the other poem I'm going to read from that chapbook collection is called Nevermore. And I don't think I'll say anything else by way of introduction. Nevermore. It wasn't until after your death that the combination of barking with my little boys and teaching poetry to college students opened a page of my memory to an old book of animal sounds. You read it to me so often, going through the standard noises, bark, meow, moo, ba. But then, beside a photo of a large black bird, the words, "And you know what the raven says." But we didn't know. I was only a few years old and wouldn't read Poe until high school. You didn't go to school past 8th grade because you were working in the fields with your family. The book was making a joke we couldn't get. Pa, you'd say? I think so. I wonder why they wrote it like that. And now, here I am, crying out for my lost love, and I know what the raven says. So, maybe for something a little lighter, I'm going to read you 2 weird Jesus poems. So
There's always room for Jesus poems that are weird.
So the first one is for a man who picketed the church that I attended when I was a child. My family went to this church, and every Sunday there was this older man who would set up across the street, and he had this giant sign that would say, "Jesus was not a monkey." And it was sort of baffling because I didn't attend, we just didn't attend the kind of church that was friendly to even the idea of evolution. So I don't know why he thought that sign was necessary. So it was just it was such a wonderfully strange collection of details. And that stuck with me for a good long time. So of course that bubbled back up and I had to play with it in a poem. And this was recently published in Thimble Magazine's Thimble newsletter. And both of these poems together, the weird Jesus poems that I'm going to read for you. So this is Jesus Was Not a Monkey. Jesus did not throw feces at passersby who gawked at him. Jesus did not have a tail. Jesus did not eat bugs. His cousin ate locusts, but his cousin was also not a monkey. Jesus was not an old world monkey like a baboon or a mandrill, or a new world monkey like a capuchin or a marmoset. Jesus was also not an ape, which is not a monkey. Jesus' monk-like group of men were not called a tribe, troop, or mission. Jesus did not have opposable thumbs and did use tools, but Christ, he was not a monkey. Jesus is not the 9th of 12 creatures on the Chinese zodiac. Jesus was not even a monkey like Davy Jones or Peter Tork, did not play guitar or make girls scream, did not get bleeped for saying hell. Do not confuse these things. And then the last poem or the last Jesus poem I'm going to share with you, and then I'm going to share one more, is called No One Beats Jesus at Chess. And this came about because I've been writing poems that use board games and other kind of hobby games, card games, things like that as a jumping off place. And then of course the poems don't usually turn out to be anything about the board game. They're often about memory or relationships or any number of other things. So this one, I don't even know where this came from, but for some reason the line "No one beats Jesus at chess" popped into my head, and then I had to go for it. So, no one beats Jesus at chess, except Peter, his dark to Jesus light. When Peter doesn't know what move to make next, Jesus sees all. Sacrificed pawn, castle, each attempt to stay alive. Jesus loves the challenge of losing as if by accident. He sighs and lays down his king. When Peter crows over his win, Jesus laughs and laughs. And then I'm going to go ahead and finish with a poem that I shared online recently, but it just seems like a good way to end. So this is a poem that I wrote for my husband. I think it was, I should have looked this up. I think it was around 2012, maybe 2013 when I first started writing it. And it is called Pandemic, a Love Poem.
How appropriate.
Yes, it also uses a board game as a starting place. So my favorite board game is Pandemic, the board game. It's a collaborative board game, and my husband and I can be quite competitive. So a collaborative board game is good for a marriage, if you're two competitive people. And so I ended up writing this poem for my husband several years ago, and it's been a useful one to our current state. So, Pandemic, a Love Poem. We swore we'd love each other in sickness and in health, when sickness was sterile, something far from here. Sickness was nothing more than bright cubes scattered across a game board in neat, precarious piles, red, yellow, black, and blue. But I have held your bag of vomit, washed bile from your face and shirt. I have seen your body seize and fall to the floor. Your stacks of bone and flesh are faulty, dear, but I would swear again to love. Red death, black plague, yellow fever, you. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Can I just jump in for a moment to say, Katie, those were great, and I really am happy that your poem with Peter Tork in it made it into the reading. R.I.P. Peter Tork.
Yes.
I'm sad to see.
Yes.
Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
My name's Sandra Marchetti. What should I say about myself? Well, I do some editorial work for River Styx. I run a tutoring center at a large community college. I write a lot about baseball. I think a lot of people seem to know that about me without sounding arrogant. That seems like a calling card. And I write essays and poetry, and I'm kind of going to take a different tact tonight than I normally would, which is that I'm going to read a lot of poems that are not published. A lot of them are not slated to be published anywhere. So they're just a lot of new things. And then I'll read a couple of things that I think are sort of pertinent to the moment, I guess. So we'll see. So yesterday was opening day for the baseball season, and it came and went, and I watched 3 rerun games. There were many to choose from, but I didn't watch anything live because there was nothing, and we're all sad about that, every baseball fan, but it's in our best interest. So I'm going to start with two very short baseball poems that haven't really made it out there yet, but if you're missing opening day like me, you might enjoy these. The first one is called A 9-Year-Old Girl Watches the 1993 World Series. You can probably piece together who that was based on my age and my gender. That square of unimaginable green, his leap over a cloud. Out of a red cap, curls tumbled with sweat beads. Color patches beamed from the box in our toy room. I craned my neck to see joy. Some of you might remember Joe Carter of the Blue Jays 1993 championship team. And if you don't, you know what joy looks like. This one is about two of our national icons, for better or for worse, I think, in the game of baseball. Pete Rose and Ichiro meet in baseball heaven or at a card show. After hustle's laughter wears off, their orbits align. Ball cap to black sunglasses, criminalized and sainted, inscrutable. God watches their gaze settle up the middle. That's where great hitters are always looking, I think. Okay, so I have one here about leaving the stadium. I'm using it as a very fancy transitioning device. Tunneling. I leave my seat and walk beneath the stadium, expecting to find daylight. Cool as a cave, sound fades at this distance. I bend to meet the chanterelles, clean as sponges between my fingers. I eat them, tubed within the blackness. I think that was the last baseball poem I've written, and it's very marginally baseball, but I think there's a symbolism there. I hate that word, I'm sure we all do, but I think there's a symbolism there about leaving those poems behind because they're done being written. Okay, this poem is called Glass. They reminded me of you, the two housekeepers, older women from the deep south, scraping insects from the windows with a razor blade. You held a college degree, cleaned houses through your pregnancy, lugging the vacuum up each stair. Mother, you were fastidious. They ate peanut butter and jelly, went out to smoke and flirt, but mine did their work. They checked and double-checked for you in each window pane. I used to joke around that every poet needs a poem about their mother, the mother poem, which wasn't really a thing for me until this year. I think about that. I went to Swanee one year and the t-shirt that year said, "No threat, no poem," which is a Dave Smith quote, and you probably heard it. And I was like, well, I've got to go deeper. I've got to write about my mother. I've got to write about the wound. So, you know, here I am. So I have a couple poems about my mother, and that was the first one about the house cleaning. And then this one, which is, it shows you how clumsily I've attempted this. I've actually just named it Mother. When you say you are nearly home, I look out at snow on the blossoms, strong sun ahead of the cold. You have forged me well, assigned my worries, taught me to care for plans as they dissolve like paper. I carry your nerves, those lengthy catalogs, as sparks in my pocket, flashes I scatter to scar the ground.
Mother poems are beautiful, Sandy. I'm not a big baseball person, but I get the baseball poems too. But I'm loving the mother poems.
I figure we'll get the baseball right out of the way. If you're not into it, you can fast forward through that.
I'm not a sports person at all, so all sports
Exactly.
references are lost on me.
Right. Yeah, and that's fair enough. I think that summarizes a lot of the poetry community. But some people have been very receptive to them. So I'm happy to have both kinds.
Oh, they're beautiful.
Well, okay. So the next two I'm going to read. This next one is an ekphrastic poem about an art exhibit at a school I used to work at, where this artist, Brian Detmer, would create pieces out of old books, you know, the type of old books that you really can't resell, old encyclopedias and things that are really dusty and out of date and things like that. And he would cut them into, I don't know if I would say dioramas, but, you know, create little figures within the book. You would open the book and there'd be little figures and
Oh, how cool.
words. And so you should definitely Google him, Brian Detmer. And this poem I wrote sort of as a response, and it's just called The Book. I think you're sensing a pattern here about the obviousness of these titles. The book. Glamour, in retrospect, involved false conception, which is a quote from the artist. How much less did we expect of knowledge before you? In our hands, the bland foretelling. Left to right, we read until figures emerge. Between the parentheses, I smell the whole, open and decaying, like dried bread, a greened coin, or mold. I am at the center. A friend told me about her favorite library in India, how the books were eaten through with silverfish. And more pestilence in this poem, Witness. Bugs and snakes, if you're not into it, mute now. This poem's called Witness. A fat snake swiveled down a branch into the river, and I wondered, what if I had missed that? I said to a girl, they're not usually that big. Sure, she had seen it flop. Thank God I did not. I would have screamed bloody murder. I walked back, smiling, tracing the thing's path, its inevitable disappearance. And I've just got two more here. And these are, I think, the only, there's only a handful that are published poems of this batch, and these two are two of them. And the first one is about medicine, which I thought, what do I have that has to do with our current situation? I don't really write about current events. So I thought this is close. And then the next one is about, it's kind of very lightly about mass shootings. So I said, okay, well, that's as close as I've got. So I'm going to go with it. So now now you can't think they're about anything else, I guess. This one is called Domesticity. Write about something true, perhaps the cough coming from the next room. We drove all day on freeways, past strip malls and freight trucks to get your medicine. It wasn't sublime like the lizard scurrying up the concrete stair or the slug paired with its trailing sheen. Feeding chickens isn't glorious, but rinsing your shoes in the hose is. This farm is billed as topiary, thatched zen. My cohorts watch the dumb animals eat, and I walk back in. I really struggled with the animals. I'm allergic to all of them, so I was very frustrated. I went to a residency where we were needing to feed the animals, and I was sick the entire time, and so was my cohort, although not from allergy. And this is my last one for today. I went to a brilliant panel several years ago now I've never had the opportunity to explain this poem at all, so I'm going to take full advantage. I went to a panel at the Chicago Printers Row Lit Fest 3-4 years ago now with Tracy K. Smith and Roger Reeves. And it was fantastic. I had heard Roger read before, but they were on this panel sort of interviewing each other. And Tracy K. Smith was talking about her biography. I can't remember the name of it now. It's a prose, it's a nonfiction work. And there's some stories in there about, I think, her mother dying. I'm doing a really bad job explaining this. So I could be wrong here. And just kind of like being in the room while someone is dying. And then Roger was talking about a new collection of poems that he was working on at the time that focused a lot on lynchings and folks going to heaven after being lynched, or people being lynched in heaven. And of course, these are two great African-American poets. And they got me thinking about, you know, our fear of death, I guess. And also, I don't know, fear of death, what it is like right before someone dies. So this is my last one, and it's called Ion, and I actually dedicated it to Tracy K. Smith and Roger Reeves. It's a beautiful day in America, and we are all waiting for something terrible to happen. A girl's balloon pops on the commuter train, and we think it is a gunshot. The leaves we pass sparkle with imaginary dew. More people hold books in their hands than I have ever seen. At the poetry reading, you discussed lynchings in paradise. On this beautiful suburban day, all I can see is lucid unease. Once we've talked about death, a feathered final breath of the higher self, unstable, seeing. Thanks.
Thank you, Sandy.
Oh,
You
you're
were
so good.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Who's next?
I'll go.
Okay, Sally's next.
So you can hear and see me. This is my first time Zooming, so I don't know what
You're
I'm
doing great.
Oh, great. Oh, do I have to I'm Sally Rosen Kindred, and I love Thrush poetry journal. That's my introduction. And I'm going to read things that do not appear in a book yet, but they're all in the manuscript that I'm hoping is a book that will make its way into the world. I'm going to start with a poem from Thrush.
Yay.
I'm very grateful to you, Helen, for publishing. It's about a place some of us are familiar with and some of us have only seen in the movies. It's called Letter to My 1970s. Dear Nixon, dear apron, dear child's candied tongue, there's been a wrinkle. You left the sprinkler on, the curling iron plugged in. On the table, no note, you'd remember it. Dear ones, my groovy dead, it never said, forgive me. The typewriter's still humming. It looks like rain. Sadie, the neighbor's hound, is whining in the street. It never said, remember, a tooth beneath your pillow means the president will resign, so your parents' marriage can run an extra year, stirred up by Watergate and wine. Don't forget, Sadie, tipping her brindle head. They hardly fed her. Do you hear thunder? Dear umbrella heart, it's still July. We can't spend all day in the backyard, flushed in long dresses, pretending to wave from the tarmac. Let's hit the bookcase, head inside. Secret of the bitter clock, secret of the thirsty well. Dig deeper in the couch, the plot's all wrong. Dear Encyclopedia Britannica, dear family of five, the house is shrinking by the eaves, by the dogwood saucer leaves. No room for Rhodesia and index cards that blot the rug. No more dreams down the shelf of heavy books, and the man who stood before them, emptying his pennies and his keys. No secrets, velvet. No secrets, steel wool. Mom's last Valium fell in the tub, or under the bed. Her kettle's cold, her thimbles on the porch. Dear right eye, you invented this pain. Dear left eye, stand down. Dear Nixon, dear apron, it's getting dark. You can't stay here. Best to take it at a run. Sadie will come too. Act natural, like you do it every day. Grab her leash and head for the winter trees. Bring your mittens, dear lonely. Don't sign your name.
Thank you, Sally.
You're
Thank you.
welcome,
That's a
Dan.
great poem.
Dan likes that poem. It thrills me. Anyway, so I had this idea. I was going to read a 70s poem, then I was going to read an 80s poem, and I was going to get us all the way to the present. And then I thought, who wants to get all the way to the present?
Nobody right now.
Right? So these are basically just going to hang out in the past. But the next one is, it's weird, but it's short. So it's got that going for it. The last one ended with the winter trees and the child and the dog. This one has a girl and the woods, and not a dog, but a wolf. So that's close. And it's actually the title poem of my new manuscript. It's called Where the Wolf. You think this is a poem where the wolf. The forest, after all, is a sleeve of glass daggers. You, the girl, cold throat, wet shoes. Wolf is the ghost of a hurt remembering itself. Is she? You can hear her between trees. You can see the ghost her mouth was, weaving wet fur in the shards. If the forest is an altar built in the crack of your lost one's femur, then this is the moment when the girl is you, kneeling before it. Wolf says, the scarlet bird is the one with a scar in it. Wolf says, gather stones. Will be the end of the story of the wolf moving slowly across the sentence you have been speaking since before you were born. You say what a stone says in the pocket of your dress and forget you were ever a wing. So yeah, weird but short. That's I warned you. Okay, so this is sort of vaguely current events, for which I apologize, not too current. This is a poem about being a mom and a mom to teenagers, and all moms and dads of teenagers, I think, probably have a moment when their teenager walks out the door and into the street and into the world. It's a scary moment. For me, that moment is affected by the fact that I am a white mom who has two sons who are Latino. They're Guatemalan. And I've had to watch them as young men of color walk out the door and into the street in 2016 and 2017. And so that's its own story. And that's where this poem comes from. But it starts with some birds, like so many poems. It's called Crown. Believe a crown of kingfishers, their spines tuned for ascent, their belted feathers split with blue light that scatters as they loose the tree. A crown, a wound, a consequence of birds whose blue light rattles sky, whose feathers strung beneath our star sing to bruising. Believe a curve in the road, the climb of its spine that sings under a boy, standing where an officer's car might come, might shatter blue light into the trees. Believe corona of our sun, belting its flares at twilight, suspended, a gown, a wound, a wish. Believe the crown of my son, soft, unhooded. 15 is a crown cleaving to its own shine. He swings an arm from the shoulder. His hair inks shadows over the moss. He lifts a lighter to the paper birch, beholds a leaf almost to burning. Believe that my son, his skin brown as the sparrow's throat, his collarbone tender as kingfisher's wing, belongs to me, my absent white body. No, belongs to the trees that loosed a crown of birds, a mercy. Believe my son no ornament, no form, that he should not be loosed from this place, that he should not need to fly from blue light, a wound, a crown, a circling. Believe the trees will keep close his body, that he might still hold fire in his hand.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So yeah, mine aren't fun. I no fun right now.
We're okay with that.
The beauty is
have
good. We'll take beauty.
Okay. So I just got two more, and they're both short. One is, that one was about being a mom. This one's about having a mom. My mom is 91, and she is in an assisted living 2 states away right now. And obviously I can't go see her, but I do call her. On Tuesday, she wished me a happy birthday, which was awesome, although my birthday is in October. And this poem actually comes from the experience last year of calling her on her birthday and wishing her a happy birthday. And she said to me, "Tell me your birthday, dear, so I can write it down and I'll remember it so I can call you." So if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody around to hear it, you know, doesn't make a sound. And if your mother who was at your birthday doesn't remember it, who are you? So anyway, this poem comes from that philosophical question, and it's called Mast Year, and a mast year is a year when there are a lot of acorns. So good news for squirrels. Mast Year. Now that my mother forgets me, I will stop being born. Instead, I'll tear from pine bark skin and end curled in this wood where it is always brown leaf and piano dusk, where foxes wait to nudge my soft crown. In a mast year, wood seeds fill the velvets of old trunks, where moss sweetens them in sleep. The foxes, also dreaming, judder their nut brown lids. I will not be my mother's doll or cradle, and will be theirs, red-furred for keening, until the branches teach me to creak. It's their story I'll tell, if I ever speak. My mother knows, still knows, what a mast year is, remembers red oak stones she once called the color of our hair, surfeit, brim dream, glut, blood night acorns tick and swell, don't need a future. But I will still know her, no matter how full I am of their dark fruit, how far from her twilight tongue.
I love that one. My mother's 91 also.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I really related to that.
Talk to her on the phone a lot.
My mother lives 15 minutes from here.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's
I see her all the time. Virus or no virus, I'm there.
Good for you. Good for you.
I stay away at a distance, but we see each other.
That's wonderful to hear. I just have one more, and it's short, and it appeared first in Thrush, so thank you again. This one is called "And Ryegrass and Wind." When we drove by the field where the horse always stood, the chestnut named Loretta, you'd move your small hand to the glass, say, "Horse." You'd circle your hand in the air to ghost the mall carousel. I'd say, "But those horses aren't real." You'd say, "Nay." And one day, the field had no horse in it. One day, the air was a hole all the nut brown reel had fallen through. That day, you splayed your hand on the glass and said, "Horse," the way you'd say, "Milk." And there was only thistle and a lip of light. The next day, there was a paper on the fence, some child's crayon paper of a horse. And you made me drive to the fence and climb out and touch the muddy sheet. Or we'd drive and park in front of the raw, unstained grass, our windows up, and watch the brown crayon lick the wet pulp dripping from last night's rain. You'd bring your cup of red juice or a book in the car, and you are 2 arms lifting and spinning. You are nosing the glass, and I am your mother. I am the one who is supposed to save you, my flank, my gamble, my mane, who can never save you, my flesh, my field, my whinny, my clover hair.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
Sally, did the dog's name change in Letter to My 1970s since?
It did.
That kind of hurts my heart, but it did help me not cry again. I got to tell you, the first time I encountered that poem was when that new issue of Thrush had come out in September of 2018. and I was on my way to teach my graduate poetry workshop that evening. But office hours were over. I was in my office on campus, and I said, the new Thrush is out. Let me see what's there. And, oh, Sally Rosen Kindred, I love her work. Let's read this poem. I read it, and you remember I messaged you soon after. I ended up like
Yes.
3 minutes later sobbing into my hands, bent
You
over.
messaged me too about that issue.
Yeah, it's such a great poem.
It's a great poem.
Really moving. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I changed the dog's name just because the dog's name that I used originally was the name of a dog from childhood who they did feed, so it didn't feel fair.
Right, yeah. So I just had that attachment to that dog name from that.
Yeah, I gotcha. But thank you so much, Dan. It actually meant so
Thank
much
you for
to hear
reading.
about that poem, and
Thank you.
I'm grateful that Helen included
Yes, looking at us.
I'm grateful to all of you guys for sending me all your stuff. That's why we could do things like this and have a contributor. And Sandy said to me, I was a contributor years ago. I don't care. You were a contributor. And you'll be again, I'm sure. Who wants to go next?
I was looking,
Okay, Jennifer's going.
Oh, sorry, Dan. Did you want to go?
No, I was just looking at our gender balance and thought I would like be the like I would be the balance here in the middle. But
You wanna
please,
be-
Jennifer,
you wanna
go
be-
ahead. Go ahead. No, you're ready. Let's go. Go ahead.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Helen. This is,
Oh, thank you
this
guys.
is amazing. And you know, I should have grabbed the poem that was in Thrush because my book, I'm Jen Martelli, by the way. I know some of you I'm just kind of seeing now for the first time, so it's great. So I'm the author of this book, My Tarantella, and I think, Helen, you took the first poem that I wrote for this book, which was started from the story of Kitty Genovese. And I was so thrilled. I could not believe that I had gotten a poem in Thrush. I can't even tell you. So anyway, I'm going to be reading some stuff from some new stuff that I too am hoping develops into a book. I've never left Queens, New York, though, because this started as I said, I'm going to write about Geraldine Ferraro. I don't know why, you know. So I feel like I'm these Italian women from Queens. I don't know. They're trying to tell me something. So, anyway, so like any other, you know, poem or group of poems, you know, they morph. So it becomes about me, or it becomes, you know, about being Italian, or in this case, you're going to hear a lot about food. Sorry. Okay, so this first poem, just to let you know, I used a form that I saw Diane Seuss using, which fascinated me. It's 14 lines, like a sonnet. Each line has 17 syllables. And it just became this really kind of interesting way to write a poem. So this is called Maiden Names. Sometimes when my joints pop, a woman appears and wants to talk to me. No matter how carefully I move, these women want to use their tongues. We all know that the dead can't speak, but some can shake rice in a tin sieve. I once heard that the first tambourine was formed deep in Italian groves where women danced while cleaning rice, and later where some women conjured ghosts. I was ashamed to say I swapped my father's name for my husband's name. The vowels so round at the end, they slipped into my smooth white sockets. No matter how far back I searched, the names were father's names, thick as guns. If I owned a gun, it would be pearl and cold, so shiny it looked wet. Its sound would sound more like air sucked out of small pink lungs or finger snaps. No matter how far back I traveled, Hanover Street, Avellino, I ended up with a silver axe, a hammer, a boy, a blacksmith. My father was an Italian man, so are my husband and my son. No matter how I move now, women pop out of me and they sound like guns. Gray Figs and Leaves by Wedgwood. There's a mother in this poem, just to follow the theme. My mother's china set was bone white, barely used and rimmed with real gold, so nobody wanted it after she died deep into that awful summer. The bowls were too shallow. They could barely hold one ladleful of the alia olea only my uncle was allowed to make each Christmas Eve, days after the solstice. The oil rose in fat round shapes to the top, a slick layer on the hot broth above the strands of spaghetti, and around the one anchovy, its salty, thick ocean taste lasting too long. The Strega, a block up from our home, read our futures from oil floating on top of water. How the oil refused to sink, how it refused to join, how that shaped its essence. How the oil could look like a monster's egg or the lost green beryl that fell from my mother's ring. Sometimes I forget what is memory and what is wished for. Would my mother be with me for all time? Would I keep her china with the wreath of gray figs and leaves with metal paint that could explode? What of her ring? Would it be too hard to sort through her home? Relinquishing. These aren't happy poems. I'm so sorry. I realize I'm like, oh.
That's okay.
I'm really
It's okay. And you know
They
what?
don't need to be happy.
I mean, I'm really, really like a funny person. So I guess all my
And I'm going to use these.
If you make us laugh in between, that totally counts.
I'm sorry.
Those are beautiful. They're beautiful.
And I'm going to use these poems against my Italian family.
Write it back.
Because I can just think of reciting the first one while I'm handing a piece of cake to every male Italian relative after dinner because they can't get up to get their own damn cake. So I'm with you. I'm with you. I can't wait for more.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, woo, relinquishing. For months now, I've refused 3 types of flesh, from a cow, a pig, a fowl. I'm not pure though. I can't resist cheese and its clotted shades, creamy, knobbed and knotted mozzarella, bone chèvre, blue veined blue. For Christmas, G mailed me a tin of struffoli, small balls of fried dough drenched in honey sprinkled with candy beads, sticky sweet gold drops on the tin lid. The bees in the comb that made the honey humped and were smoked out of their hive. They loved their queen left all baffled and alone. Someday, my kids may write about me. Not a poem, but maybe a list of all the hurtful seedlings I planted like radium in their glands. Maybe they will remember some love too, though I was mostly afraid. G's cancer leaps throughout her body. When I call to thank her, we talk about turmeric. I ask her, as a vegan, would she wear pearls? The oyster, pried open for its hard, comforting spit, looks clitoral, the salty, faceless meat. And just 2 more. And not much happier, but a little bit. Agrodolce. That's a kind of sauce. It's like a sweet and sour like sauce, you know. I don't like it too much, but anyway. Agrodolce. I ate a lemon from the groves on the coast of Campania. Citrus so big, I cupped it like a heart in my 2-lined palms, sunk my teeth into sweet pulp. Can you feel the juice as I say this? Can you feel it in your jaw's hinges, in your ears? Deep inside those warm canals, there's an anvil forging sound, meanings hammered out. Do you wonder what people are saying about you? Do you wonder if people say anything at all? At some point, we all disappear. I had the Strega read my right hand lifeline. It crossed my thumb mound, encircled my wrist like a healing wound. This was a plot as well. I asked her to read what was on my left. You are unable to avoid what you wish to. The whole world skewed on its iron axis. I swallowed the soft bodies of oysters that same oracular night. Their shells told a story too, a landscape. Their bodies tasted like a blue-green ocean, like a woman taken whole into my body. And my last one, my daughter, who's my oldest, she does live in New York City, though she's quarantining in Rhode Island right now. She's like, she decided to leave like the day they said, if you leave New York City, like you have to quarantine. I wanted to tell her, but I've been saying, please come up, you know. Anyway, so I was down there, we were at the Museum of Modern Art, and I rediscovered Joseph Cornell. So I saw one of his boxes I honestly wanted to steal. So this poem has an epigraph. It's by Ted Koppel, who was moderating the debate in 1984 between George Bush, the father, and Geraldine Ferraro. And I just found it so ironic, considering everything she said. He said, do you think that the Soviets might be tempted to try to take advantage of you simply because you are a woman? And this poem is called Vanquished. At the MoMA, I stood too close to a Joseph Cornell box, Maria Taglioni's jewel casket. I'd been thinking of buying a yard of plush velvet to stretch taut across a canvas, of pinning or gluing loose pearls to the dark, mossy surface. Taglioni's story captured Cornell, that late night moment when she danced for the Russian robber, a highwayman on a panther's pelt thrown over the snow, and each muscled grunt froze in the Eurasian air, crystallized before she landed her perfect jeté. She carried a glass cube after that to remember how she vanquished him. I wanted to create my own night sky, a collage of stars, constellations, the Queen, the Kokor, the Madonna, the constellation of return. I'd add a midnight blue sky whale to pass the seasons. I'd pin everything I ever lost, what I love and loved. I'd try to capture, even an idea, a sadness. Cornell's box, that jewel casket held glass cubes for Taglioni. For the stars that night, he bought a cheap rhinestone choker at Woolworth's, a brown velvet lining for the pelt, a small pane of blue glass because it shatters into slivers that won't be swept up. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Beautiful. Also, I'm slightly hungry now. It's all the food.
As long as you're not sad, that's all.
I need to go grab some cheese. I'll be right back.
They're beautiful. Who wants to? Dan, you want to go next?
If Rachel and Amanda don't have any objection, I'll go next.
Okay.
We've had Marchetti, Martelli, and now Albergotti, and you were talking about being Italian there, Jen. Let me promise you, I'm absolutely the least Italian of these three here. I do descend from an Italian named Albergotti, but he came to what's now Beaufort, South Carolina in 1732, and he was the only full-blooded Italian on the boat. It's the strangest Italian-American immigration story you will ever hear, but I'll try to represent. Thank you so much for doing this, Helen, and for all of you for participating. It's been great. I've enjoyed listening to everyone's work, and last week's reading was terrific too. Everybody there, those searing poems from Lynn Lawson were so great, and just everybody there. But I wanted to make specific reference to Julia Kolchinsky-Dasbach saying at the beginning of her reading last week that she felt like we need to hear uplifting poems now in this time, and so she was looking for them. And then, of course, she quipped, I couldn't find many among my work, right? And,
That's okay.
and with Jen's, I always say it's kind of a cliche of the poetry reading, of any poetry reading you go to, that 5 poems in, the poet will apologize for how depressing the poems are.
Right, I think that's most cases, absolutely. I think I'm guilty of that too.
I just have to say, I'd love to read something uplifting, but I've been writing apocalyptic, elegiac poems for the better part of 2 decades now, so that's pretty much what I've got to choose from. Sorry. I'm going to read first an old poem that I've heard from people about over the years, and has kind of popped up again in the last 2 weeks for predictable reasons, I'm afraid. But it's from my first book, The Boatloads. It's called Things to Do in the Belly of the Whale. Measure the walls, count the ribs, notch the long days. Look up for blue sky through the spout. Make small fires with the broken hulls of fishing boats. Practice smoke signals. Call old friends and listen for echoes of distant voices. Organize your calendar. Dream of the beach. Look each way for the dim glow of light. Work on your reports. Review each of your life's 10 million choices. Endure moments of self-loathing. Find the evidence of those before you. Destroy it. Try to be very quiet and listen for the sound of gears and moving water. Listen for the sound of your heart. Be thankful that you are here, swallowed with all hope, where you can rest and wait. Be nostalgic. Think of all the things you did and could have done. Remember treading water in the center of the still night sea, your toes pointing again and again down, down into the black depths. So there's been a theme of reading poems that were published in Thrush, and I'm going to read one. And this is a little more lighthearted. It's as closest I can get to uplifting. I don't know if it's uplifting. It's pretty much, in fact, a poem of despair as a writer. But last week, Emily Corwin read an Abecedarian, right? A poem that follows the alphabet down the left margin. I had never written one, but I've always very much admired the work of Barbara Hamby. If you don't know Barbara Hamby, a terrific poet who teaches at Florida State. She is the queen of the Abecedarian. She's written amazing, like copious Abecedarians and Abecedarian variations. And I had tried for a while, and I'd always found it like a little confounding to try to do that form. So I finally decided I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it so full bore that it's going to be out of my system completely. So Helen published this poem in Thrush. It's a double Abecedarian. It follows the alphabet from A to Z down the left margin, but the ending letters of the lines go Z to A on the other side. And then each line is also alliterative, consonant, or assonant on the letter that starts that line. So it's called 26 Ways of Marking on a Blackboard. Being an alliterative, assonant, consonant, double Abecedarian, damn it, for Barbara Hamby. A plan of grand ambition should announce its aim with ample appellative pizzazz. But beware boasting too boldly, see above. Better to be just barely brash, not brazenly cocky. Critics care not for conceited craftsmen of characters, coyly cool, constantly prolix, delving depths of dictionaries for arcane denotations, so damn desperate to draw every eye to their elevated education, wrestling to make earnest effort seem mere improv. 5 lines finished and fuck all begun. Figures, eh? Time flies and then you fail. Then you give up. Or you get a glimmer, gear back up enough to go for good, if not great. That Hamby has a gift I'll never have, I fear. She holds keys to hidden holy word hoards, invokes immortality via imaginative prestidigitation, turning letters into ideograms, or jury-rigging syntax to justify a jiggly, jelly-rich juggernaut of a sentence ending with Iraq. Kennings kept in her word kennel, along with the kitchen sink, are kernels keen to drop like a lumberjack's axe. I'm left looking like a loser, 12 lines into this lax little lay with no more than a mite's measure of momentum, mostly meandering through material in no way noteworthy beyond nominal alphabetness. Though now I know I'm in line 14. I'm on the downslope, of our obligatory ode. Only 12, now 11 lines to go. Oh, maybe now I'll pull this poem off, not end up pummeled by its plan like a punch-drunk punk. Querulously, I now question our need for goddamn cue. Again wish to quit this quixotic rage rather than return to the rack of a ridiculous revolving alphabetic reverie that reels like pie, smugly sliding always away, slipping past my swiping grasp. This scheme seems as though the line totals 10,000, not 26. I'm towed down by a tedious tidal drag under the surface, ultimately succumbing to utterly unhinged, unbridled self-loathing. If victory in vaudevillian verbiage came with venal reward, or vino, maybe this venture would be worth it. Instead, I wallow in wasted tongue wagging. Words, 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 said Xenophilic. He chose Wittenberg over Elsinore, yes. Hamlet, vexed, overtaxed, dyspeptic, yammering on in a yawning yodel as annoying as a Yorkie's yelp. Got complaints, bub? Zounds, me too. A 0. I've zigged, zagged, failed. I'm zilch next to your zenith, Barbara. Boy, I've never read that poem aloud.
That cannot be an easy poem to read out loud.
That was so fun. I love that.
Oh my God.
So,
Dan, can I raise you a book that you have to read?
yes.
Okay, Devin Miller Duggan's Alphabet Year.
Gotcha.
It's entirely abecedarians, and then she does disorderly abecedarians, where she was pulling letters out of a bag to determine the.
Oh, really?
Wow.
I didn't think it was like, I love her work,
Yep.
and I didn't think she was going to pull it off. And I read through the book, and I was like, why is this working? So, love it.
Hamby has a whole series of 26 poems of what I would call abecedarian sonnets, and they go from first letter, the first line to the last letter, following the alphabet A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z, 13 lines. That's what the first one is. The next one begins with B and ends with A. The next, she does the entire damn alphabet. We poets are crazy, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay, so
in a great way, though.
I
It's
wanted
like
to read that older poem
cry.
first because it
Like,
kind of speaks to the condition we're in. But I wanted to read that poem from Thrush to thank you and support and promote literary journals. Thank you to Thrush. And Thrush is free out there for anyone with a modem. But I hope those of you who enjoy it will, when fundraisers come around, support the work of Helen and her
Dan.
crew on Thrush, and I hope you'll support literary journals in general. So I'm going to read some poems that were recently published in some literary journals too, and promote
Good.
these others as well. So this poem was in the most recent issue of the New Ohio Review. It's published out of Ohio University, Athens, Ohio, and this issue just came out about a month ago. And last week, Christian Antone Girard was reading here in this series, and
Yep.
He responded to this poem when it was published with a very kind note that he said he really loved this poem. So Christian, if you're watching, this one's for you, brother. This one is called Final Visitation. After talking with him for 30 minutes, as he lay cocooned in a thin wool blanket, I told my father I had to head back to Conway. He turned his ashen head a bit and said, "Conway, that's where my son lives." I met my sister's eyes before fixing his in mine to say, "Father, I am your son." His eyes widened in that way that makes us say, "You look like you've seen a ghost," or as if he found himself the quarry of a hunt. I touched his hand before I left to show him I was real. I think I could have walked through walls to get to my car. So grateful was I to be that ghost. And this one is in the latest Southeast Review. So subscribe to the the New Ohio Review, everyone. Subscribe to Southeast Review from Florida State.
And New England.
And the New England Review, which I do. It's great. This is another one recently published in the most recent issue of that journal, and it's a strange poem. I hope you'll hear it as a persona poem. And this is a poem where I've got a very small little word in the last line. It's simply the word "this." And I hope that word "this" will tell you everything you need to know about the speaker and the auditor of this poem, this little dramatic monologue kind of poem. For sale, used. At a corner store downtown, you can buy a freshly refurbished soul compacting machine with brushed nickel finish. High volume capacity, over 7 billion PSI, high-pitched cry muffler. Fully updated, but you can see the original German craftsmanship. It's got a pigmentation isolator, resistance suppressor, purity indicator. Lots of optional accessories too. Night vision adapter, snake or stripe decals, national anthem calliope powered by the goddamn gas exhaust, I kid you not. You can take care of just about everything with it. And all you need is this skin and your real ID. I committed a small sin there. I had my little 12-minute timer on my phone all ready to go, and I forgot to hit start. So
Nobody's timing.
I hope I'm not going long. I'm going to read just maybe 2 to 3 more poems. I hope I have time. These next 2 were in 32 poems recently, which is also a fantastic poetry journal.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic poetry only journal. We love those. We love
I love those.
poems. So these 2 were in that journal recently. This one, I call it a chaos sonnet. I like to play around with creating sonnet forms. So this poem, the first 7 lines have 7 different sounds at the end of the first line. And in the last 7 lines, those sounds reappear as in the ends, but in no scheme, right? They just have to reappear. That's what makes it chaotic. So, suspense. The woolly mammoth lumbered over bones of dinosaurs and crocodiles and men, and then was gone. The children of Pompeii were buried under pyroclastic flow. Now, we've made enough bombs to vaporize all nations, races, scientists, and sects. Still, time flows forward while amber suspends. On an Italian shelf, silent as stones, 2 mites and a fly, Triassic insects trapped in amber for 200 million years, hold history's most bated breath today. For eons now, they've been dying to know. Staring with tiny prehistoric eyes, they're itching to see how this whole thing ends. I came from Googling, what is the oldest thing we found trapped in amber? it's held in Italy right now. That's a bit of amber. They dated it 200 million years. These little flies. It's wonderful to think of them buzzing around long before anyone thought of poetry. And then the other one that was in 32 poems is called The Elect. I believe, Katie, you said it's always a time of flux. Yeah, of course, when we're giving a birth certificate, we're given a death sentence as well, of course, all of us. And we don't know when that's going to be. So I think the greatest sin in many ways is living in fear, because especially fear of death. That doesn't mean anyone should be reckless. Certainly not in these current times, go about and put anyone in danger. But at the same time, we have to live our lives very deliberately because we know there's an expiration date. That has something to do with this poem, I think. The Elect. Like the vole, I have wandered afield under the greater sky, not knowing 9/10 of my brethren are already gone. I have found another of my kind and joined her walk toward the sun in its setting. I have entered the earth. I have nosed the root that feeds the vine. I have seen the remains of others, stopping and walking on. One morning I woke, and the other did not. I have felt the warmth that dries the dew. I have been happy. Above me, I have seen a wheeling halo of birds. I feel like I've probably taken up my time at this point, so thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Who
Thank
left?
It
You
was
guys
really beautiful.
decide. Rachel or Amanda, who wants to go next?
I'll go next. I mean, I don't mind.
Okay.
My name is Rachel Marie Patterson, also known by my married name, Rachel Patterson Moles. And I first want to thank Helen for having us. Thank you so much. I know I'm a broken record now, but this is such a great opportunity and such a cool thing to do. What a great
Thank
idea.
you.
I wish I'd thought of it first. And I am the editor of Radar Poetry, the co-editor with Daryl and Schrager. And I'm a poet. I'm also 9 months pregnant. So excuse me while I fidget around a little bit. But it's actually been really cool to feel the baby kicking and moving around with all the poems.
Oh, that's really cool. You have a poet.
Maybe. We'll see. So I actually am going to read a series of poems, but I'm just going to read them as one long poem, which should make it easy to listen to. And like everyone else, of course, what's going on right now is on my mind. But I didn't want to share a poem that was directly about any of that. And so this series is a series that I wrote while I was living in a town called Metairie in Louisiana, which is just outside New Orleans. And it was really a time in my life where I felt isolated and dislocated. The place was very unfamiliar. And while I was living there and with all the things that were going on in my life, I found that I was experiencing the strangeness of normal things, or the things that people around me were treating as normal but felt very strange to me, which was an interesting experience. That's sort of what these poems are about. And they're all called Metairie, so it's easy. And I want to thank Helen because a couple of these poems did appear in Thrush, so she was one of the early supporters of these poems. So I'm going to read 10, but they're very short. Metairie. 1. The moon in the curtains has teeth. The clock blinks its only message. I think about everything I have been promised. What if the days won't ever unstretch themselves? Tomorrow, I'll push another empty cart through the grocery store. I'll strain against the towers of cereal boxes, listening for news. Now, dim light crawls under the bathroom door. The dogs sigh and turn in their tiny beds. Outside, the dark palmetto twists on its spine, and the yard slumps one more inch into the marsh. 2. A long summer has stopped the earth. No trees on fire, our lawn baked dry through Christmas. Saturdays, we watch the boats on Lake Pontchartrain trace their lazy, cursive loops. We walk in the ditch that cuts the park in half, then drive home. If nothing changes, nothing ends. The paper house quivers. The screen door slams a prayer. Every day the weather holds. 3. Gray saints hover outside my car window. Girls cross away from Our Lady, towing their lunchboxes, their hair wound tight with plastic globes. These sidewalks never ice. The girls run into the street without jackets, calling names. At home, I boil water and hold my breath while watching the news. The paint peels off the refrigerator faster than I can patch it. I have tried to have a joyful heart, to be made perfect. I have made myself as small as one linoleum square. 4. No matter how often it's run, the ceiling fan collects dust. Mother calls twice a week and reminds me to drag out the garbage, to vacuum the good rug. I drive back and forth to the pharmacy, to the grocery store, the gas station, to a neighbor's house where we eat slack vegetables off plastic trays by an empty swimming pool. Sometimes I remember nothing about the ride, the yards, trees. I can't remember whether I used my turn signal, whether I fed the dogs. Someone emptied my drawer full of pens last night and left all the blinds clicked open. 5. The neighbors unfold metal chairs to watch a road crew rake asphalt. All December, I can't even bring myself to mail a letter. I worry about the pipes, the telephone wires too close to our heads. Mosquitoes hatch in the empty planter behind the house, forgotten, now too heavy to dump. A little sleep, a little slumber, and poverty will come upon you like a robber. Some nights I drive with my headlights off until the last television in the city flickers out. 6. The palmetto bugs refuse to be poisoned. One night, we argue half asleep, then wake to thunder that rattles the marsh soil. In the morning, the dogs lap spilled coffee. A friend calls from Boston to tell me about the burst pipes and the blankets. I recite the names of the saints I've learned. High noon, the moon and the sun cross in the sky. I take a picture. The neighbors tell me they're building another building where a hospital used to be. 7. This morning, it's too cold for municipal men to hose last night's whiskey from the sidewalks. The neighbors bring in their cats, then leave bread and batteries on our porch. Our landlord says there's not one bag of salt in the whole green state of Louisiana. We inch our cars into the shed. Later, planes stop flying low over the houses. We build a tiny snowman under a shocked palmetto. 8. This headache is a sure sign I've been hexed. I press a poultice to my eyes, then take black coffee back to bed. Outside, a nest of wires grazes the clothesline. Jimson weed chokes the lawn. The day wears on, but the light doesn't change, or the weather. A cure-all has just enough poison to stun, not enough to kill. I've learned not to talk about the oil in the river. Instead, I talk about the next thing I'm going to eat, or the dry cleaning. White birds preen in the median. When I cross the bridge, I think of what's under it. 9. We know the month by the color of the sky. White for March, green for August, when alligators sun themselves in drain pipes and baby pools. This morning, early, we jar awake and find the bedroom door loosed open. We wonder if we should buy a gun. Little girls walk to mass in wilted linen dresses, carrying their shoes. We keep 2 plastic kayaks in the shed so we can row toward the neighbors in a storm. 10. Out past the causeway, whole towns have been swallowed by cat claw and climbing fern. You can always be alone here with the salt grass, the rigs and their perfect lights. It's quiet enough to count the transformer towers that rise for 100 miles across the lake. Back in the city, hopeless dogs run savage on the levee grass. A boy is left face down in a drain pipe. His mother howls as she swings his white sneakers over the wire. And that's it. Look how fast, 10 poems.
Wow. That was haunting. And I loved so much of the imagery that you used in there. And I was in Lafayette for 3 years for grad school. So I was resonating with some of the imagery.
You're beautiful, Rachel. Thank you so much.
What a haunting ending.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for everything you've shared. I'm in good company.
Amanda's next.
Sorry, it was just my husband's making dinner on the side, so I was confused. So I'll read my thrush poem, which I thank you for publishing, Helen. It's called The Great Ones. The blonde ponies trail everything behind them. Though I only see one now, I know from its assurance they come in clusters that do everything that's quick, not just tricks, but also things of substance that can be seen as quick as their glitter, that keeps you from seeing what else they are. This pony does not await my belief. It demands my breath. I can only just get out gold. It is coming for its favorite oats. It is coming for my hand. I can't keep myself away. It makes me stay. So that's my thrush poem.
I remember it well.
So the other ones I'm going to read are from my book, which came out this November. What Need Have We for Such as We? And I'll read the title poem, or the poem from which the title comes, called Webbings. Okay, here it is. Each thing is made with the things that show it how to make, with threads of it things that have not been made, and yet they can't be other things than things that are made in a similar way. What need have we for such as we? For such as we have never worked. When you fail to make, you imagine a medium through which you might have. But now, as I make with myself, I do not know how the unmade lets me. I forget as I work how it doesn't work through the hands that don't automatically know. I forget how it works, the self that works into the belief that it is itself. And I'll also read this poem called, sorry. I want to read I'll read a story. Yeah, it's a story and it really happened. So, a story. A dying bat got in. I thought it a brown leaf. Perhaps because the dying bat was next to an old rose. Both were going to die. Both were going to be shoveled onto the doorstep. Both of them definitely died. Both of them definitely stayed on the doorstep, and as they did, they died even more in different ways. The rose lost color, but did not really change. The bat started to look like both of them. And now I can finally look at the bat for as long as I can look at the rose. So I stop to say to the bat what I am now supposed to say to myself. I say to the bat, do not tell yourself you are bad. You were never bad, but always like you are now that you're dead, much the same as you seemed before, but less, crouching, more unfurled, more like the rose the longer it died. You're definitely better than you were at your worst, when in the act of dying, without even seeming to change position, you moved, not a leaf. It seemed that what you were not, and so must have been, was disclosed. What you were not, and so must have been, rather than just something else. And so I'll finish with a prose poem. It made me think of the Katie's poems about Jesus, and this is one of mine where Jesus comes up. You know, he's it's a Lent poem. 2, so metaphysical complaint on Ash Wednesday. When Valentine's Day and Ash Wednesday overlap with the black lace pinned over the red, the black does not subsume the red, but makes it sexy like date night. If red is tacked over the black, then Christ on the cross becomes a Valentine's card that is country brand corny and thus a less sexy version of date night, a date without my godless husband who especially hates country songs about Jesus. His aversion usually prevents me from desecrating my religion, as St. Valentine's feast threatens to do. Keep it from meaning. Keep from wearing a black date night dress or red to go with ashes. Keep from doing what I wish, since I love all layers of meaning. I especially love the meanings of colors and every effusion in which they get lost. Ashes. When I nod down a path, I disgruntle a man, occasioning words. At first, there was bestiality, and then women started walking around on God's earth. And I like the feeling of being off the spectrum of man and his animals. Who knows what I will do with the words one might say, as one walks decently along, speaking the truths that keep their own counsel, not bothering any who doesn't butt in. What business do I have being friendly, smiling at my fellow creatures, looking just as I would if I looked at myself in the mirror? A romantic effusion. This is not about me, he says. This is about me and you. Like anyone else, I would be nice if you weren't that way that doesn't let me be who I am, for who I am in my heart would never do anything bad by you. I would not do what you make me do. I would never do anything less than you deserve, and you would have no grounds for complaint if the world were such as the world should be and such as it needs for the proper function of you. If the world were that way, there would be no obliging those who would have you otherwise than at heart you really are. For in your heart, through which I know who you are, I am your life. That is why being together is getting down to the basics of you, getting down into where we are bodies together, and when you get up, I can never be right. So that's it. Thank you so much again for
Thank you.
Wonderful.
I'll stop the recording now.